Hello and welcome back to Jo's Art History Podcast, a podcast which celebrates all things art historical with me, your host and your resident art historian, Jo McLaughlin. Welcome back, it is episode 57 and this week we are once again joined by the brilliant Mimi Cullen, who this time is returning to the podcast to discuss all things Tracey Emin. Tracey Emin seems to be a firm favourite with the listeners and my guests on the podcast, and it's no wonder. She is a pioneer feminist painter, and she is someone who has really carved a niche for herself within the art market globally. And Mimi is here to talk about 3 incredible works with us this week. The first being My Bed, Something's Wrong, and a work called I've Got It All. The last 2 I'd actually never heard of, and it was a really great opportunity to dive into Tracey's back catalogue of works once again and just learn more about her. I feel Tracey is an artist that the more I read about her and listen to podcasts about her and read books about her and go to shows with her work, my love and appreciation for what she does just grows and grows and grows. And Mimi's love and appreciation of Tracey shines through, and she's been a real guiding light for Mimi's own personal practice as well, and she talks a little bit about that in the podcast. So sit back and relax as Mimi and I discuss the brilliant Tracey Emin. Enjoy. Okay, so Tracey Emin, who interestingly, whenever I put out an open call, I always have 2 or 3 people minimum who write me every open call for every season saying, can I discuss Tracey Emin? And can we talk about Tracey Emin in some way? And actually, you've been on the podcast before and we had a lovely conversation about Van Gogh and his life and some of his works. But before you spoke about Van Gogh, when you emailed, you said, actually, I would love to talk about Emin. And
Yeah.
I'd already had booked in someone to talk about Emin. So I was like, oh, let's not do 2 in a season. Let's do 1 each in every season.
Yeah.
Because I find it so interesting that people are so fascinated by her. And she's such a continuous inspiration for artists working today. What is it about Tracey Emin for you that you love about her work or enjoy about her work?
Well, what I'll do to start is, can I ask a question of, is it generally women who come to you and say, can I speak about Emin?
Great question. Yes, it is.
Yeah, because my whole viewpoint on Emin is that she empowers this viewpoint of demanding this divine attention towards the feminine experience and kind of challenging that. So it's like, her work has always been intensely autobiographical and focusing on her own narrative of being a woman. But I think why so many people find her so inspiring, including myself, is that she challenges that kind of like societal norm of women should act a certain way and look a certain way and dress a certain way. She's essentially sticking 2 fingers up to that and saying, like, fuck that, I am who I am, that's messy, that's unapologetic, that's I am me. And like, I find that really empowering and cool, because I've never quite felt like I fit into that box of what women should be perceived to be. I think it's a lot different now than it used to be, but there's still, in my life, I deal with sexism all the time. I mean, I run an art studio and gallery. All the work in there's mine. And I have a member of staff working for me who's brilliant, and he's called Jamie. But if people walk in when he's there, they will always direct everything at him instantly and be like, wow, well done for, setting this up. And he's like, this is not mine. But they instantly assume that it's his. I mean, even in terms of, I've asked this question to so many people. If I say, who are your favourite artists? Or not even that, just name me 3 artists that you know. It's always men. It's, Van Gogh, Damien Hirst, whatever, right? It's the same in, name me 3 music artists. It's predominantly male-led. And what I love about Tracey Emin is, since the beginning of her career, she has demanded such an intense attention to the fact that she's a woman and she is fighting for her place in the art world, which I think is so inspiring and just fucking cool to see. Because even in terms of, like, in my education, on my MA, every single student was a woman. And if you think about it, how often do you hear about women taking up this space? And it's like, me and you are sat here now and we're taking up that space. And like, I just think it's really inspiring to see somebody doing that so unapologetically, being themselves, never issuing an apology for how they feel. Because I also feel like the female existence is essentially apologizing for existing in a male space.
Yes. I find what you've said there so on the nose. I kind of want to like stand up and walk around a little bit and be like, yes, that's just it. That is just it. Like nail on the head. That's exactly what it is. And I'll be really honest, I didn't rate Emin. And I thought, oh, she's doing her thing. She's trying to be a bit controversial, whatever. And it wasn't until the first time I recorded an episode on her, and I think I say it in the episode, and the first season is called Kerry Curl, and she's a photographer. It was her sort of saying to me, yeah, go away and research and then come back and we'll have a real honest conversation. And she blew me away and she continues to genuinely blow me away. And really interestingly, when I was reading for this, I was reading an excerpt from Tate, from one of their curators, who essentially was like, listen, I thought she was a narcissist. I thought like she loved to be controversial. And actually, once I spent a little bit of time with the work, I really saw it for what it was. She was essentially calling out the bullshit of, why do I have to apologize for being a woman? Why should I shy away from things that naturally happen to my body? Why am I not allowed to talk about abortions or periods or mental health issues? And this was in like, she's continued to do this through her whole career. But in the 1990s, when she really sort of shot up along with a whole load of other young British artists, she was and continues to be a revelation. But what I find very interesting is that really only now, despite all her fame and media attention, she's only really now starting to match artwork prices with her male contemporaries. Despite that she's had all this buzz, she's only now really going go toe to toe price wise for collectors. That's me coming from like an art world curator consultant perspective, which I find so fascinating. And it's probably that reason is her subject matter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like how I view it is that I just think it's so fucking cool is that she sees the world for what it is because it's her perception on things, it's her experiences as an autobiographical artist. She derives all of her work from her thoughts and her feelings and her experiences. And nothing actually really needs to make sense to anyone but her. And she doesn't actually owe us an explanation for that. And I just think it's awesome to see somebody live their life without permission and take it entirely within their own hands. Because as I said, it's that thing of the feminine existence is essentially, and has been for years, being in your place and apologizing when you step out of turn. For me, she changed what it meant to be an artist. I think it kind of boils down to, for me, art's the one thing that has always loved her back. And that's the same with me, is for a long time, as a coping mechanism, as whatever, as something to do, is to not be sat and be lonely and be sat with all these thoughts and feelings that I couldn't externalize, is art is the one thing that has always loved me back. And even if it's not the best painting that I've ever done in the world, that's all my thoughts and feelings there. And I can externalize it, I can visualize it, and then I can say, fuck you to everything that's wrong within my head. And then I can move on because I've seen it in that tangible state. It's not just living with me anymore. It's out there. Like, you know, you generally make art about what you know or what you're trying to understand. And I think what's a really cool thing to have is that, you know, if you look along the basis of her over there, it's a chronological timeline of her mental state and the issues that she was working through at that time. So it's essentially all this shit happened to me, all this horrible stuff happened to me, and I've moved past it. I've moved past every single experience of these. And like, I've got a quote from it here that says, all of my tiny horrors have been livable. I have not died. In fact, life has become better. And I just think that's so inspiring. That's so cool. I mean, I can't specifically remember which artwork it is, but it's film based and it's video based. And she like has the balls to stand there and name every single person that sexually abused her by full name, government name. And I just think like you are what I aspire to be. Like having that confidence and that self assurance of just being like, no, do you know what? I'm gonna stick up for myself and I didn't deserve what happened to me. And this is their name and they did it. I just think she's so fearlessness and just fierce in everything that she does, that when people, because she's got a lot of critics and a lot of people don't understand her, when people kind of discredit her work, they don't understand that she is her work. I feel like that's the whole point. Like when you're understanding who Emin is and her work, it's that they aren't actually two separate entities. They are completely overlapped, because everything that she does and puts into her work is all integral pieces of her life that make up who she is.
Mm. And do you know what? I completely feel guilty to that. When I first came across her when I was at university, I thought it was Emin the ego and then Emin the artwork. And there's no ego. It's her being really fucking brave. And actually to use that fear to sort of drive her creativity forward, because fear is the thing that cripples everybody. You're scared to put out an Instagram post because you're worried what people see. You're scared to pick up the phone and call someone because there was an argument. You don't know what they're thinking about you. You're scared to talk about something that was very traumatic or something that's triggering for you. And she takes that and goes, cool, I'm going to use it to fuel. I'll put it out there and then I'll just let it go. That's it. And she is forever moving forward, not reinventing herself so much, but looking to re-energize and give back. You know, she's just come through this really severe illness stage in her life where she had cancer. She's had a lot of surgery. She's had a lot of medical conditions and disabilities that she'll take with her for the rest of her life. And if anything, I think from what I take it from where she is now, she's got this renewed sense of purpose and place for living. And this is part of her story. She's not a victim. And I think that's what's really important. She's had quite literally, if you were to ticky box list all the things, we're sort of like, yeah, that's horrendous, horrendous, horrendous to happen to you. It's happened to her, but she sort of wears it as like a badge of honor, just to be like, yeah, I've lived and my work is an expression of those experiences. She is so powerful. She's so powerful.
Well, I think what's really cool as well is obviously it's horrific that she was so ill and obviously went through life-changing surgeries to battle her cancer, and she come out of the other side. But I thought what was awesome was when she was going through all of it, she was like, do you know what? No, I'm going to be sober now. And she's been sober for 3 years. And that's just inspiring in itself. Like if you take away, you know, everything that's happened to her and you look at that for what it is, just being like somebody who's relied on drugs and drink and whatever to be like, no, do you know what, actually, I'm done now. I think that's one of the most inspiring things ever. Like, I don't know if you've heard of or read her book called Strangeland.
No, I've not, but it's been on the, oh God, if I say it's been on the list for about 4 years, I wouldn't be lying. Yeah, I've never read it, but
Yeah, I was going to say, right, there are some absolutely beautiful quotes in that. And that's like an integral part, I think, of understanding her a bit more, because obviously a lot of her work is confessional and it's like she's unpacking and revisiting trauma on her own terms. But with Strangeland, it gives you a real pathway to understand a bit more of the psyche, because obviously everything's in literally her own writing. And it gives you like a lot more of an inside view and a lot more context within her life and like things that have happened throughout it. And there's a lot of, I think why people are so scared of Emin is because there is actually a lot of relatability and comfortability in what she's saying, because people do feel like that. Like there's such an encompassing feeling of vulnerability throughout her work. Quotes. So, for example, there's one from Strangeland saying, and all the things I think and all the things I believe are making me cry. And it's like, I feel like it's that scary realization, you know, where somebody says something and you think, oh, I didn't realize other people felt like that. It's like I said to my best friend today, she came and saw me at work, and I was like, do you ever think about the fact that we're not kids? She was like, what? And I was like, yeah, we're not even teenagers, mate. Like we're nearly 25. Like we're adults, we're not kids. And she was like, oh fuck. And it's like that, you know, that like heart drop, like stomach dropping thing where it's like, oh, I didn't, and then you get scared and you don't want to talk about it, because it's like I think that's why a lot of people shy away from her work, because they don't want to admit that they also share some of the feelings that she does.
Yeah. Maybe it's a case of like accidentally holding up a mirror to people. And even, I mean, I've been to so many Tracey Emin exhibitions since living in London. And I went to one just after her mum had passed, and she had made this unbelievable show at White Cube in Bermondsey. And I think it was called I Cried for a Million Years. I think that was the title of the show. Don't quote me on that. And the room dedicated to drawings of her processing her mum's death. Like I burst out crying, and I had to leave the show. I was like, it was so raw, because you could see in how she drew and what she wrote was just so, I don't know, so to the point and so
Yeah.
raw. It was, I think that's the only thing. It was so raw, and I've never interacted with art that's that powerful before, because it's so confronting and it's a human experience, regardless of what that human experience is. And I think Emin does it, as you've just really beautifully put. It makes you think about hard truths that you don't allow yourself to sit with sometimes, be that your youth, be that your work living situation, be that your situation in terms of having a family or not having a family, relationships around you, relationships with yourself. Yeah, I think she's a genius. She is a genius.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I think obviously in specifically one of the works that we'll talk about called Terribly Wrong, I think what also makes people feel quite uncomfortable is obviously the subject matters that she creates works about uncomfortable to sit with a lot of the time. People don't want to talk about rape and abortion and sexism and violence towards women, but unfortunately it fucking happens, and it needs to be spoken about, because at the end of the day there's only so much that we can do as women to protect ourselves. And like, if I can make one point, it's teach your fucking sons not to be like that. Like, it's your responsibility to teach your sons. And I think what makes people so uncomfortable is, so like with Terribly Wrong specifically, the subject matter is so raw and intense and uncomfortable to sit with, but it's expressed in such a childlike manner. It's really innocent in the way that the composition is, and in the way of working. It's a lot of people, specifically critics, will derive that her work isn't artistically challenging, but I don't agree with that at all. I think that it's the most raw, innocent reflection of how she feels, and a lot of it's quick in fruition, which leads me to believe that it's like almost like word vomit. It's like, I need to get it out now. But you know, like when you would draw when you were a child and it was simple and it was to the point, it's that juxtaposition between the blunt honesty of her truth and the violence that she has endured, displayed in such a simple way, that I think that makes people feel more uncomfortable than seeing something all encompassing, if that makes sense, like overwhelming.
Yeah, I completely get it. And actually, when you were talking there, I was sort of like, it completely makes sense, because the innocence, if you will, and how she's drawn it is almost kind of like what you were saying, how you use art as a way of communication. You don't have the academic vocabulary / sometimes you can't put things into words. Doesn't matter academic vocabulary, sorry. I mean, like, you don't have the words to express how you feel. You just don't, regardless of how you want to say, it's not going to hit in a way that expressing it can. And I think that's particularly for Terribly Wrong, that is what that is. But I love the rawness of it, and what it sort of leads on to. And before we started recording, we were talking about how Terribly Wrong is like the beginning of her broaching the subject of sexual trauma and abortion and things like that. In a very big year in her career, because two of the works you've chosen to discuss, they're both from 1997. One is My Bed, and then the other is Terribly Wrong, which they're all to do with mental health, physical health, and things like that, but very different ways of approaching it.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing as well. I think that Emin kind of gets her work almost gets diminished into being one thing. When if you really think about it, she's written books, newspaper articles, film work, audio-based work, exhibitions of, sculptures. My bed's a sculpture.
Oh,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? And there's like applique, there's fabric work, there's photography, she's so multifaceted that I didn't want to pick 3 monoprints because her monoprint works are beautiful and her photography works beautiful. But I wanted to kind of explore different ways that she uses different media to convey thoughts and feelings. So I think it's really interesting because they all you can tell every piece is by Emin off the bat, but it's like the tone is almost different in each one. It's like portraying a slightly different thing, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. She is forever experimenting and sort of pushing herself as an artist, which I find really, really interesting. And you've brought it up already that she's written lots of books. She's a fabulous writer. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes below too. She used to have a column in, I think, The Guardian or The Independent, where every week she wrote about something that was going on in her life in sort of the end of the 90s, sort of 99, 2000, 2001. And this was like a long-standing column. And how she writes is so poetic. It's almost like when I read people that can write like that, it sort of boggles my mind that you can express yourself in such a way that you have a grasp of language so superior and poetic, but also not in a way that's intimidating. It's very
I think that's the main thing about her is that I think people confuse the honesty for confrontation because she is blunt in what she says, but it's actually a sense of comfortability. For me, it's like, oh, she's being really vulnerable and I feel like that. And it's like almost that thing of like, when you meet somebody and you feel safe with them, like you feel like, okay, I can trust you with my thoughts and feelings. Doesn't happen very often, or in my experience anyway, but sometimes when you meet somebody, you just think, actually, no, I trust you. That's how I feel about her work. I think I trust your perception on your life. I trust that everything you think and feel is a must through your work. And I just think it's absolutely beautiful. Like, I think it's just so inspiring to see somebody continue to develop and challenge themselves throughout their life, despite all the challenges and horrible things that have happened to her that weren't in her control. And the fact that, first of all, she's carried on through everything. And second of all, that she's still got that kind of childlike wonder to be like, maybe I'll try this. Her work's always beautiful. I just think she's such an inspiration. Take away her work, just her as a person, period. Like, I think she's absolutely brilliant. And I think it's a real shame that she's not spoken about in a more positive light, or that in terms of art education, that there isn't necessarily a limelight on her. The artists that you generally get told to research and look at and replicate their work, more user friendly, I guess. I just think she's a great example to show people that maybe don't feel like they fit in the box that they're being told they have to, specifically in the art world, that there is space for you. You just have to make it.
I think that's a really wonderful point, actually, because people love to pigeonhole you. And I feel that Emin has never let herself be pigeonholed. And I think you can see that through, although her themes are of a similar ilk throughout her whole career, the way that she plays with materials and perspectives and her ideas, and even sometimes her emotions. I think one thing that I find so incredible about Tracey, when you think about, when she came up through the ranks in sort of the mid to late 1990s, she is so emotionally intelligent and in tune with herself. Like, to go back to Her Bed, which is probably one of her best known works, what I love is the idea to put it in a gallery or make it a piece was her coming out of a stint of a 4-day long depression where she was semi-conscious, and she sort of came round and she went to get water. Then when she came back into the room, she was like, how is this my life? What have I created here? To look at it like that and think there's something here, instead of being so like, well, this is a mess, I'm going to clean this up. And what, like, she airs her dirty laundry for everyone to see unapologetically. And
I was literally just about to say to you, it's specifically with my bed, she's both metaphorically and literally bring her dirty laundry in public. And it's like that intensely personal feeling with it, is that you feel like you know her, or at least you know her experiences, whether you like looking at it or not. Obviously, the bed for most people is like the most private place. It's a lot of solace is found there. And I mean, like, specifically in my work, I found that beds are a repeated motif that I have throughout my work, because it's that thing of like, that's where I feel safest. That's where I feel like I'm on my own. It's where I feel that nobody else can come and get me or see me. And the only person who sees my bed is my partner. And it's intensely personal for so many people. I think to take such a widely known symbol like that and show it on a level where if your bed's messy and you know somebody's coming around, you make it. It's a real intimate thing to get to the point where you let somebody see your messy room, your messy bed. You're on that level of comfort. It's like, for example, the people that are closest to me in my life, I wouldn't care. But if I knew, you know, one of my friends coming around that I didn't really know or whatever, I would make sure everything was spick as span. But I know for a fact that, you know, if I came home to my partner's after a long day and his bed wasn't made and I jumped in it, I wouldn't think a second thought of it. And that's because we're so emotionally attached. And I mean, I love him more than I've ever loved anything in my life. And I just think it's so cool to take something that's so intensely personal and put it on that large a scale. It just shows that how she's so fearless of public perception. And obviously my bed was a massive taboo.
Yeah. But it was also such a taboo, but it's still this, what, very quick maths here, 25, 26, 7,
24,
6, 20, 24, 25, 26 years later, people are still talking about it. There's still an interest on it. People are still trying to pick it apart. And I don't think there's many contemporary artists that can hold that space for that.
I was going to say, I mean, she didn't even win the Turner Prize for it. And you never hear people speaking about Steve McQueen's work that won it. It's everybody speaks about my bed. And if you say Tracey Emin to somebody, the first thing that they think of is my bed. It's what they connotate her with, which generally isn't a widely received great reception because it was so taboo. And obviously it's amassed by private and personal items like condom wrappers and ashtrays full of cigarettes and empty bottles of alcohol and whatever. But again, like she said in Strangeland, my clothes feel stuck to me. I smell of decay, the acrid smell of a lonely person, a person with no respect or regard for themselves. And it's like, if you've ever suffered with a state of depression, of grief, of loss, if you've ever got to the point where you can't leave your bed because of your mental state, you can feel that on a personal, deep level where it's like, okay, I see you. And I think if you've been through that, you see the work in a completely different context and light.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The sheer sort of darkness that you go to as a person in those moments of grief and upset and depression. And that's what I mean by like her emotional intelligence while still within that to be so aware that, oh, actually, I need to do something with this. I'm onto something here. Like this needs to be spoken about. I find endlessly fascinating. But you introduced me tonight to 2 new works by Emin that I had never come across. And I've briefly mentioned before that one of the works is from the same year that the bed was first exhibited. So that's 1997. And it's called Terribly Wrong. And it's a monoprint. When did you first come across this work? And for people listening at home, it's It's a monoprint that says something's wrong on it, even though it's called Terribly Wrong. And it's of a figure's lower half of their body. Their legs are splayed, their genitalia. I'm assuming it's Emin. Her vagina is on show, and there's this seeping liquid between the legs of the figure. Where did you come across this? Because it's quite a stop you in your tracks work.
So when I first came across it was I was doing my undergrad and I was doing the dissertation for it because for my dissertation I did it on Emin and it was essentially an exploration into what is the reasoning behind her work. Is it self-fulfilling prophecy? Is it narcissism? Is it autobiographical? Is it to move past her experiences? Obviously, the whole time believing it was the latter. But when I was doing all my research and I was looking through works, I didn't really see this one have much of a divine attention drawn to it that a lot of her other pieces had. And when I saw it, I thought, like, that's incredible. That's like a piece that you would look at no matter who you are and think, like, stopping your tracks at it. I think the reflection, specifically her work through her monoprints, is that there's that sense of urgency throughout them. Monoprinting is really quick in fruition. Like, you ink up a glass screen or a screen of some sort, put the paper face down, and then you write back to front and you draw backwards, essentially. And when you lift it up, that's the piece done. There's no time to kind of second guess. You can't plan it out before you do it. You've just got to sit and do it. And it's almost like you can derive her stream of consciousness while she was actually creating any monoprint that she's done, because every single pass is immediate and unique. You can't pick. Obviously, you can mass create it by doing multiple copies of it. So essentially what I was saying is that because it's so quick in fruition and you can't plan it out. You know, you can think about what you're going to do, but you can't have a plan for it. If you were painting, for instance, or, you know, if you're an art director staging a photograph or something, it's what it is, as that is creating it. And you can almost derive her stream of consciousness throughout seeing that work, because you can see every stroke as it was made, because every pass on it is immediate and unique. And I think what's really beautiful about that is that it cannot be recreated. It was made in that one moment in time, encompassing everything that she thought and felt forever on this piece of paper with the ink. Because, for instance, you know, with a painting like that Van Gogh might have done of the sunflowers, for instance, you could do that as a school task. You could be told, okay, we're going to do an artist study of the sunflowers. Draw it, paint it stroke by stroke, and then hopefully it'll look something like it. With a monoprint, it would take an insane amount of skill to replicate that at all, which I think adds even more to that intensely personal and intimate feeling of the work.
And I think also, going back to picking up on something you said earlier, is I think people really underestimate, because there's not very many marks on the page, and it's this very almost naive, almost childlike doodle. People completely undermine the skill it takes. Every mark on that page is considered. Even though it's quick, it's thought through and it's produced in that way. There is not one thing out of place here. And I think maybe that's why people belittle her work so much. They don't really appreciate the actual skill and accuracy that goes in to making works like this.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, even in terms of the kind of style around it, like the aesthetic of it, because it's quite scratchy, because that's what monoprinting generally looks like. But by the same hand, it's so like effortlessly spontaneous, particularly the typography. It's raw, it's in her own handwriting, it's intensely personal, and it looks as if it's almost engraved into the artwork, because obviously she's put her pen down harder to write than she has to draw. And what I really like about it is that technically there's mistakes in it, you know. Some of the letters are backwards because I presume she was so in her space while she was creating it, trying to get out of this episode, that she's forgotten that she has to write backwards on some of the letters, and it's almost feeding into the what I said earlier, is that you can't really have a plan for this kind of work. And it's almost that she's just wanting to get these thoughts and feelings out and onto the paper immediately, which kind of suggests to me that Emin's hurried production, seen throughout the majority of her work, can be seen as almost a form of self-care or preservation. And it's that she's then able to withdraw from her constant thoughts and emotions, because I think maybe the notion of being an autobiographical, I think perhaps maybe the notion of being an autobiographical artist is to, be able to detach from the emotions that we feel by putting them out into the world and not having them just live in our heads anymore.
I've never really thought of her process like that, but it completely makes sense, and I think that's an amazingly astute observation. And I think it just, every time I record one of these episodes and I hear someone else talk about Emin and their interpretation and their love of her work, it just makes me appreciate her as an artist and her practice more and more and more every time I speak of it. With Terribly Wrong, the subject is one of her first time sort of broaching the idea of, or not idea, broaching the subject of abortion, which is incredibly taboo even now. You don't, as a woman, you don't speak about it. Even, I'm a woman in my 30s. I've had friends that have had abortions. I've had circles of friends where multiple people have chosen to have an abortion, and they won't tell each other because of the shame and the stigma. And I think to tell the world of your experience and put it out there for everyone to be like, there you go, this is what's happened. It was horrific. I know she has a video work where she sort of essentially talks you through the day that she had her abortion. And then the days after that, because she nearly died. I think she said 2, and she nearly died after one of them. It's horrific, but it's so brave and is brave the word? I even feel like that's such a cop out, and it's not sincere enough to say brave. I don't know what to say on it.
What my viewpoint on it is that, abortion's seen as such a dirty word, and that it's very hush-hush. We don't speak about that. And I just think it's fucking stupid, and it's delusional, and it's a form of healthcare. There's so many sides to it, and I just think it's one of them things where, and at the risk of sounding snowflakey or PC or whatever people have decided to coin, just being a fucking person who wants other people to live a good life, it is a human right to decide what you do with your body. Men don't have to take birth control. Men don't have to clean up the mess. And it's like, there's so many issues that come into it. It can be, for the health of the mother. It can be, it's not the right time. It can be, I don't know, because of rape, sexual abuse. And it triggers something insane within me, because I just think, what right does anybody else have to comment on somebody else's choice with their own body, which does not affect anybody apart from themselves and possibly their partner? You don't know, so shut the fuck up. That is my complete viewpoint on it. And I think for Emin to come out so fearlessly, I think it is brave. I think it's incredible. I think, there's many women that I know that have gone through it, and they feel this shame and this guilt that they carry around, and it's not because of their decision people are going to feel about it. And it's like sparks an intent. Somebody feels so ashamed and guilty for making a choice that they had to make. Nobody thinks, oh, I'm going to go and have an abortion for fun. It's a serious issue. There are many steps and had to occur. And whether you agree with her personal beliefs or not, I think for the majority, the morality within her work, you cannot fault. As somebody who wants other people to feel safe.
No, and I think, yeah, don't really think I can put it any better than that. And thank you for being so honest in your opinions in and around abortion. I completely agree with you. I think it's a woman's right to decide what she wants to do. I think it's this subject that, as you say, people don't choose to do it for a laugh. There's a very it's a healthcare procedure. It's a very complicated healthcare procedure, not in terms of what they're doing, but in terms of like the after effects on the women. It's the thing that stays with them. And I feel that Emin is someone that is a living embodiment of the lifelong impacts that this procedure can and does have on most women. The fact that she constantly comes back to it, but also she owns it and she claims it. And I particularly love in the next work that you've selected, I've Got It All. I feel it's another way of her claiming and saying this was the correct choice for me, and I'm living a much better, healthier, happy life for me because I made that decision for me. And I feel there aren't a lot of works, there's no artworks actually I can think of that celebrate that choice that a woman has made. Like, I don't know any bar Tracey Emin who unashamedly says, and she says it all the time in interviews now, like, I'm not a mother to children, but I'm a mother to my artworks. And I made the right choice for me in choosing to have abortions. And I'm much better and I'm much happier for it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with I've Got It All is that it's another media as well. So it's a photographic solution. I'm pretty sure it was an enlarged Polaroid, which was blown up pretty big. It's 4 by 3 foot, I believe.
Oh my gosh.
But what I really like about this work is that it suggests, well, it's another piece of work which is met with urgency to actually create it. So obviously Polaroids are they're instant photos, aren't they? And I would say it's arguably the fastest way to have a physical image right there in front of you, almost instantaneously, particularly in 2000. It was taken during like a performance type thing where Emin is sitting, again, a common motif within her work, with her bottom half bare, which is seen in Terribly Wrong, for instance. And she's gazing down at her hands whilst caught by the camera. And what I love about this work is because throughout the rest of her work, you can kind of derive that it's about her. She's reclaiming her personal experience. She's using her voice. But in this work, it's undeniable to say that she is the complete focal point of the image because, first of all, it's pretty much just her in it.
Yeah.
She takes up the majority of the frame, again, demanding attention from the viewer. But this time it's her face to face with it. And particularly because this is a later work than the other two that I previously mentioned, I just think it's a real nice timeline there of her putting her face in it and being like, you're going to look at this. I think the lighting also shows this because she's brightly lit. It might be from the flash of the Polaroid, but the background is like really dull and sparse. But obviously attention then is also on the cash because that's also reflected from the flash and it's a lighter colour.
Yeah, and what I found when I first looked at this is I actually thought she was sweeping up the cash, as in like almost like she'd won a jackpot, and that she was like bringing it in to sort of celebrate a win. But then I read this thing that was like, actually, it's the opposite. It's sort of flowing from within her, and she's trying to stop the flow of cash from coming out, trying to like stop her body ejecting something, which really made me look at it in a totally different way. Yeah, how did you see it when you first? Did you see it as her gathering money, or did you see it as...
when I first saw it, I saw it as her gathering money, particularly because of the composition of the background. It's in an almost completely empty room and sparsely decorated. It's got I think it's a Ryman stationery bag in the right hand side. And essentially what I kind of thought when I first saw it is that obviously the image is littered with money and it looks as if she's shoveling it towards her groin, but her hands are overflowing with the mass of the money, which you can physically see through the strain in her hands. So I think it's really interesting, that it's actually the opposite way around, because the strain in her hands suggests that there's some force going into this, which again shows, a personal motive towards it. However, like I do feel like, although this work again is autobiographical and like you said can be linked to her abortion being the right choice for her, is that I believe that this work also challenges something deeper. Like I know that a lot of her work's done, but I'm not quite sure what it specifically is, because there are many interpretations that you could almost derive from this image. So it could be a way to reinterpret money as sex, because she's shoveling it around her groin. It could be a commentary on sexuality and the freedom of gaining financial independence. So, I'm a woman, I've made my own fucking money. I'm happy, this is who I am. And then I thought, it's also choosing what you want to do with that. Or maybe it's a commentary on capitalist society. But I also, interestingly enough, linking it back to Terribly Wrong, I thought it might also be something related to almost a maternal instinct, because if you look at the image, she's kind of pushing the money towards her stomach, grasping her stomach the way that you kind of would do if you were pregnant. It's not a violent grasp, it's almost like, a comforting one.
Yeah. So that's really interesting that you've put it like that, because another thing, how I saw it was maybe like all the money that she saved by not having children, and this being like a financial reason behind the abortion, as well as because her abortions happened early sort of 1990, and she didn't really start making money or become well known until sort of 97, 98, 90, sort of late noughties, which is a really long time. And I know that she's spoken about the poverty that she lived within when she'd first left art school and was trying to sort of figure out her way in London. There is something quite maternal in how she's holding the money, or how her hands are. I can totally see that.
Well, what I thought was really interesting as well is that she's actually wearing a Vivienne Westwood dress in the photo, which I thought could also be, a way of showing the juxtaposition of, quote unquote, having it all, but the kind of reflection of her being in an empty room. So I kind of read this as accentuating the fairy tale of commercial success, and, her roots, like you mentioned previously, are still planted in this spare apartment, because she's not losing who she was just because she's got it all in the titular title. So I thought, it might also pay out to the fact that no matter how much money she makes, it's almost a statement of like, well, I've got it all wherever she may be, because no matter what, she's always going to be herself. The same way that we all are stuck with ourselves forever, we're going to be the person that we've known the longest. And I think it's a beautiful way to signify that of, I'm not going to forget who I was, where I've come from. And because I'm myself, no matter where I am, I have got it all.
Yeah, I love that. And again, I would not have thought of that as an interpretation to it. I love, because although it's quick in how she's put it together, as you've said, with this sort of Polaroid image, this sort of quick snap it and then we've got the image. She will, of course, had to have thought about the surroundings in the room. And yeah, like you said, the emptiness of the room and the dullness of the room around her is also saying something. Like there's a reason it's there. It's not an accident. And again, this is why she's just an actual genius, because most people just look at that and go, cool, it's someone like gathering up money into their crotch. And there's so many levels at which you can pick it apart. Oh God, I find it, I could talk about her forever. But I've had you on for over an hour now. So I am just gonna very quickly sort of wrap it up here. But Mimi, again, oh my gosh, thank you so much for coming on. I just think of all the guests I've had, you always come on and you always give such brilliant. You articulate yourself so beautifully, and the artwork's beautifully. Like, it's such a thrill to have you back on and like to talk to you about Emin. And I know she means a lot to you as well as an artist. So it's really lovely to give you this space to sort of bang your drum about Emin and how much her work means to you and how much she means to a lot of people. She's a really, really special artist.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that I'll be back on at some point to rant about someone for an hour, well, over an hour again.
Absolutely. I mean, I would have you on longer, just an hour is my limit, unfortunately, with it. But it's always a quick hour. Now, I've had you on before, but can you just tell people listening at home where they can find you and connect with you and find out what you're up to?
Yeah, so I'm Mimi. I run NI Studios, which is an art studio and gallery situated in the Corn Exchange in Leeds. You can find all of my work online if you're not local. The website is nistudios.co.uk. All of my socials are on there. I do a lot of autobiographical work, do a lot of commissions, photography, kind of bounce around. So if you're interested, come and check the studio out or give us a follow or whatever.
Yeah, and I'll leave a link to your socials and a link to the shop and things like that below in the show notes. So Mimi, it's so great to have you back on. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me.
And there you have it, another episode of Jo's Art History podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please make sure to like, rate and subscribe. It does really help in letting other people find us. You can listen to Jo's Art History podcast on any streaming platform, and you can also watch it in a video format on YouTube. If you would like to support the podcast in any way, I have now released an Amazon wish list, which you can also find in the show notes below. This will allow you to donate in part or purchase in full an art historical text that is of interest to me and that will help in research towards future episodes. And it would be really wonderful if you've listened to quite a lot of these, if you could buy that as a way of marking patronage towards the podcast. That would be brilliant. If you would like to get in touch, please do. It's always lovely to hear from people. You can email me, joesarthistory@gmail.com, or you can get in touch with me via Instagram, which is @joesarthistory, or you can search for my name, Jo McLaughlin, via Instagram and you will find me there. That's all we have from the podcast this week. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, I'll remind you to keep learning and remember, art is for all. Bye.